You ever been to a inflatable house, what I call a bouncy house? In eastern North Carolina, and quite frankly, most of North Carolina, it's usually a place in the mall. It's a place in a strip mall where they have a lot of inflatables and what I call bouncy houses set up inside of a very small environment. And usually there's one person at the front door. They check in, they get you to sign a release, and then they'd say, have fun. What's wrong with that? Sounds like fun. I mean, we all grew up riding in the back of pickup trucks, sitting on the tailgate going 30 miles an hour, and none of us ever fell off and broke our hip or broke our neck. The problem with that is our legislature here in North Carolina has specifically said this is dangerous stuff. Believe it or not, these inflatables, these blow-ups, can be extremely dangerous. And the issue is when they're not used correctly, they're likely to hurt folks. My name is Joe Tarnstool, and I've been doing personal injury work for 20-something years. And during that 20-something years, 23, 24, whatever it is years, I've handled a number of these cases, and they've been referred to me from all over the state. And the reason is because for some reason I got into them years ago. I had one, and then that became a couple. But the big issue with these cases is kids get hurt, and that's what bothers me about them. And the way kids get hurt is because I've never pursued one of these cases where the owner of the bouncy house, the owner of the inflatable house, the owner of the strip mall venue knew what they were doing. There are specific laws which follow these things. And you say, why in the world would there be a law on an inflatable, on a blow up, man? It's just air, right? Well, the problem with them is twofold. One, most of the kids who are getting in them are little. And so they do one of two things. Either they mix the age of the kid, so you have a kid who's 8 and one that's 3, and they're both jumping up and down, and the 8-year-old lands on the 3-year-old and breaks his leg. Or you have an inflatable that's supposed to be used outside on the dirt, used inside on the concrete. And what's the difference? Well, when you land outside on the dirt, there's some cushion underneath the bottom. And when you land inside on the concrete, there's no cushion, and we have a tibula and fibula fracture. Or the other thing we see is they take a 12 or 14 foot high inflatable that's like pushing against the drop down ceiling, and you can't see anything that's going on in it. And they have one kid up front, chewing bubble gum and eating popcorn from the place across the mall. And has no idea, or she has no idea what's going on back there. And a kid goes back there and gets stuck. And that's why we have very specific rules. Believe it or not, the North Carolina Department of Labor is actually charged with inspecting and making sure these places follow the rules and regulations. You say, what about these? My kid went to a birthday party with Susie Q, and at Susie Q's house, they set up a 15-foot tall inflatable, and it was great. Search YouTube, flying inflatable. Why do these inflatables fly? Well, the inflatables are flying not because they're not properly set up. So what happens is these groups rent these things, and then when the parent shows up and he says, okay, it's my birthday, and they get him to sign a release that says, you understand and have learned everything you're supposed to about setting these things up, right? And the parent looks at him and goes, huh? And he says, sign here. And he goes, okay, right? And the places that rent these things, when they don't come and set them up themselves, don't give the parents any information. They just say, man, it's easy, turn on the fan. What happens the first time that the wind comes up and blows? Well, there's a big warning on the side of the inflatable that says, make sure you anchor it down using X number of anchors. Well, what if you don't? Again, searching flying inflatable. There was 2 on the news in North Carolina this year. One of them almost hit a 5-year-old. Went way up, 50, 60 feet in the air and almost came down on a 5-year-old. How does that happen? Happens because it's not anchored down properly. Why is it not anchored down properly? because you've got a commercial inflatable that's being given to a parent for a 5-year-old's birthday party with no information. So, does this mean your kids can't have any fun? No, it doesn't mean that. It means pay attention to where you're renting these things from. And if you go to the mall and there's an inflatable over there and you've got, the teenager who's waiting for his next cigarette break, who is in charge of signing you in and giving you all the rules, think twice. Because those places are where kids go in to get hurt. You put 30 kids in there with, 5 parents and kids sitting up front, eating potato chips, and they're not paying attention to what happens back there. What are the rules? What are the rules and requirements? The rules and requirements are literally set out by our legislature, just like they do, just like they set out rules and regulations for how you drive your car. Why would they do that on inflatables? I mean, who cares? Well, look, there's only one reason why they do that. The things hurt folks. They didn't hurt folks. They didn't hurt folks bad. Then they wouldn't have done it. I mean, literally, our legislature has a lot better things to do than sit down and make specific rules on inflatables. But they did. And they did because kids were getting hurt. And as a parent, as an attorney, it's one of the things that really bugs me, is when I get involved in these cases where kids get hurt for absolutely no reason. Why are the kids hurt? Kids are hurt because people weren't paying attention, and they weren't paying attention to the rules and regulations, and their buddy said, hey, we can run this thing down at the mall and charge, and pay one kid to run, 10 of these inflatables. Well, the rules say one qualified, trained employee per inflatable. One per one. In 23 years of doing this and handling a whole bunch of these cases, I have yet to run into a one-to-one arrangement. Not once. 1-to-1. So how do they get around it? They come in, they say, well, Fred, the parent, he signed for his 4 kids and he's gonna watch his 4 kids. Well, what happens when Fred goes back there and the 5-year-old goes this direction and the 12-year-old goes this direction and the 2-year-old's grabbing his leg and pulling him towards the little kitty one? Well, he has no knowledge of how dangerous these things are. So he goes off toward the youngest kid and the other one's running a free-for-all. So, inflatables, bouncy houses, North Carolina, pay attention, watch your kids. Again, I don't want a phone call from another person who's been injured on one of these. I'd rather go handle other kinds of cases. Hurt kids are tough for everybody. Thank you for your time. Again, Joe Tarnstool. I've been doing personal injury work here in North Carolina for over 20 years with O'Malley Tarnstool. Thanks.